He melted forward, and then he said he learned to control it. The liquid poured like a smooth, silver wave. In 1986, a group of young actors stepped into Hollywood like soldiers entering a battlefield. Their war movie became a masterpiece and launched careers that looked unstoppable. But 40 years later, their lives took turns no one expected. One actor admitted he spent $50,000 on prostitutes and later revealed a secret that shocked millions. Another lost nearly everything in painful divorces and now survives on only $4,000 a month. A third once saved his co-star's life during filming but now faces struggles of his own. What happened to these once rising stars is truly surprising. Charlie Sheen was only 20 when he was thrown into the muddy jungles of the Philippines. Nothing prepared him for what director Oliver Stone planned. This wasn't a normal Hollywood set. For 2 weeks, Charlie and the rest of the cast were pushed into real military-style training. They slept on the ground, soaked in rain, bitten by insects, and yelled at by real combat veterans who didn't care that they were actors. It was harsh, frightening, and exhausting. Charlie later said he thought he could actually die while filming. And this was before the cameras even started rolling. He was already falling apart mentally and physically, but that was exactly what Stone wanted. The pain, fear, and confusion he felt would appear on screen as real emotion. The role wasn't even meant for Charlie at first. It was supposed to go to Emilio Estevez, and then to Keanu Reeves. Both dropped out. Oliver Stone saw something in Charlie, a fragile, damaged edge that made him perfect for the role of a frightened, idealistic young man thrown into the Vietnam War. When Platoon came out in 1986, Charlie was only 21, and the film became a global hit. It won Oscars, critics praised it everywhere, and Charlie became a star. But instead of rising higher, he began to collapse. His fame burned fast and dangerously. In 1995, while testifying under oath, Charlie admitted he had spent at least $50,000 on prostitutes. That same year, he was arrested for slamming his girlfriend's head into the floor. On the outside he laughed, joked, and acted charming, but behind closed doors everything was getting darker, more chaotic, and more destructive. By 2011, everything exploded. Charlie was fired from his show 2.5 Men after a series of wild interviews, drug binges, and threats. He posted strange videos online calling himself a warlock with tiger blood and claimed he was winning even as his life fell apart. It looked like the end. Then in 2015, he went on live television and revealed he had HIV. He had known for years and had kept it secret, paying people to stay quiet. His fear and shame pushed him deeper into dangerous behavior. But the moment he announced it publicly, clinics across the country reported a sudden spike in HIV testing. More people got checked, asked questions, and sought help. Experts called it the Charlie Sheen effect. The same man who became the punchline of countless late-night jokes had unexpectedly saved lives. His money slowly disappeared and the scandals continued, but somehow he kept going. By 2017, Charlie said he had become sober. Many didn't believe him, he had said it before. But this time, something seemed different. He wasn't chasing fame. He stayed home, watched movies, cooked meals, and focused on being a father. Then came a twist no one expected. In 2025, at the age of 60, Charlie released a memoir and a Netflix documentary. They were calm, honest, and surprisingly thoughtful. In them, he opened up about something he had hidden for most of his life. He talked about same-sex experiences, not as scandal, not as drama, but simply as truth. He refused to label himself or explain anything to fit a category. He talked about how freeing it felt to finally stop pretending, to stop performing all the time, and to finally be himself. Tom Berenger, whose real name is Thomas Michael Moore, was born on May 31, 1949. For years, he walked through Hollywood unnoticed. He was just another struggling actor trying to survive in New York. He worked as a baggage handler in a hotel, then in a chemical plant. Nothing came easy. There were no shortcuts. His first real break didn't come until 1975 when he appeared in the soap opera One Life to Live. He was already in his late 20s by then. He hung on and pushed forward. When Platoon hit theaters in 1986, he finally earned his place in Hollywood. But playing Sergeant Barnes came with real suffering. Oliver Stone didn't just give him a script, he threw him into the same brutal training Charlie faced. Berenger and the rest of the cast carried heavy 40-pound packs, marched through thick mud, slept in the rain, and barely ate. It was 2 weeks of pure survival. He lost 28 pounds. They filmed long days, exhausted, hungry, and bitten by mosquitoes. It wasn't acting anymore. When he looked into the camera with those empty, battle-worn eyes, you could feel the real cost of that experience on him. Off-screen, his life was also difficult. Berenger built his career by playing powerful, intense men, characters who demanded attention. But in real life, things weren't so strong or stable. But in his real life, Tom Berenger kept losing the things that mattered most. He went through 4 marriages. He had 6 children, many of whom grew up far away from him. In 2011, during one of the hardest moments of his life, he faced a brutal divorce. A lawyer handed him a legal paper he didn't fully read, and trusting the wrong person cost him more than $100,000. He lost rights he didn't even know he was signing away. He later admitted that the betrayal wounded him deeply, and he never completely healed from it. Hollywood slowly stopped calling. His name disappeared from movie posters, and younger actors took the spotlight. While fame moved on, Berenger quietly stepped back. Now at 76, he lives a calm life with his 4th wife, Laura Moretti. Fans still recognize him when he goes out. They see the tough soldier he played on screen, but they don't see the man who lost almost everything on his way to becoming that icon. Willem Dafoe grew up in Appleton, Wisconsin, and from the beginning he didn't follow anyone's rules. He didn't want to. In fact, he was expelled from high school after appearing in an adult film. Years later, he just laughed about it and said, "I just wanted out." That attitude shaped his whole career. Dafoe never chased fame, he chased intensity, creativity, and risk. When Platoon came in 1986, he was already respected in underground theater circles. But the movie changed his life. Like Berenger, he was thrown into Oliver Stone's chaotic jungle world. The cast went through 30 days of military training led by Vietnam veteran Dale Dye. They marched, crawled through dirt, got fake ambushed with real explosions, and lived in constant tension. They weren't pretending to be soldiers, they felt like soldiers. During filming, Dafoe got sick with yellow fever. It wasn't part of the script. It was real. He hallucinated from the heat and lay there burning with fever, but he still showed up for his scenes. He didn't want the illness to ruin the performance. The role mattered too much. Sergeant Elias wasn't just another character, he was the heart and moral center of the film. Dafoe gave everything he had to bring him to life. After Platoon, Dafoe made choices that were strange, brave, and often unpredictable. He got fired from Heaven's Gate for laughing during a serious scene after standing still in one spot for 8 hours. Years later, in Antichrist, director Lars von Trier used a body double for Dafoe in one intimate scene because, according to him, Dafoe's actual anatomy was too distracting for audiences. Dafoe laughed that off too. He also earned a Golden Raspberry nomination for Speed 2, a movie that scored only 3% on Rotten Tomatoes. Then he completely transformed himself in The Hunter, playing a wild bush tracker who had to skin a wallaby in one take or it would explode. He did it perfectly on the first try. No excuses, no complaining. Dafoe said yes to roles that hurt, roles that confused people, roles most actors were scared to touch. He once played a beating chicken heart on stage and performed the movements over and over until the rhythm felt alive. He didn't care if the role was small, strange, or painful, he cared that it challenged him. And the risks paid off. He earned 4 Oscar nominations. He worked non-stop, from Wes Anderson films to the 2025 remake of Nosferatu. He holds dual citizenship with Italy, splitting his time between Rome and New York. In public, he walks around like an ordinary man who never expected to be famous, never demanded attention, and never needed to pretend. His net worth is around $40 million, but money was never the reason he worked. He said it himself. If you follow the work, the rest follows. He never cared about fame or the spotlight. Willem Dafoe just wanted to keep disappearing into characters, to melt into roles until no one could tell where the man ended and the performance began. Now at 70, he still moves with the same restless energy he had as a young actor, unpredictable, sharp, and full of life. Even though he once lost a job for laughing on set, he never lost his momentum. His face, with its fierce angles and intense expressions, still burns into the screen every time he appears. Forest Whitaker was only 28 when he walked into the jungle to play Big Harold, but the emotion in his eyes made him seem much older. At about 5 feet 10 inches and 75 kilos, he had a solid build, yet the heat, humidity, and fear of the Philippines changed him fast. The role didn't give him many lines, but it didn't need to. What he delivered was something far harder to fake, a deep, quiet sadness. You could see the emotional weight of the war in the way he moved, the way he froze, the way he listened. Oliver Stone wanted realism, and Forrest gave it to him completely. But the realism came with a cost. Forrest had planned to bulk up for the role, to literally become Big Harold. The jungle had other plans. The food was terrible, the training was harsh, and the days were long. Halfway through filming, he had already lost nearly 8 kilos. What started as preparation had turned into pure survival. His cheeks thinned, his eyes darkened, and the fear in his expression was no longer a performance, it was something he was actually living through. Then came the machete incident. It didn't even happen during filming. The actors were just out in training, trying to stay in character and live like real soldiers. Forrest spotted a coconut on the ground, lifted a machete, and swung with all the frustration and exhaustion he'd been holding inside. He missed. The blade slammed into his thumb. There was blood everywhere, fast, bright, and shocking. What Forrest remembers most is the fear that surged through him the moment he saw the cut. The panic hit him harder than the pain. It felt like the world stopped. They rushed him to a medic. And the strangest part? It was all still rehearsal. They hadn't even begun shooting the scene. Yet that moment stayed with him for years, the weight of the role, the danger of the environment, the thin line between acting and reality. When Forrest eventually won an Oscar for playing Idi Amin in The Last King of Scotland, people called him fearless, transformative, and one of the greatest character actors of his generation. But long before the awards, long before the prestige, he was just a young man in a jungle, bleeding and shaky, trying to understand the emotional cost of a war he was only pretending to fight. Oliver Stone noticed how much weight Forrest had lost and pulled him aside. "You're supposed to be Big Harold," he said. But by then, the name didn't matter. What mattered was the truth the camera captured, the hollow cheeks, the 1,000-yard stare, the drained body shaped by exhaustion and fear. The performance became real because the experience was real. By 2025, Forrest Whitaker is 64. He moves quietly, thoughtfully, carrying a strange mix of strength and softness. There is still something fragile and haunting in the way he stands, something shaped by the years, the roles, and the memories that never quite left him. Even now, when he steps onto a screen, you can sense a lifetime of weight behind his eyes. You can still see Big Harold in him, the quiet strength, the tired eyes, the feeling that he once carried a heavy world on his back. Forrest Whitaker walked into the jungle for a movie, but he walked out with pieces of it that stayed with him for life. Keith David was 30 when he stepped onto the set. Tall, strong, and built like a wall at 6 feet 2 inches, he had a deep gravelly voice that made everyone pay attention the moment he spoke. People called him King, both in the movie and behind the scenes, not just because of the role he played but because of the power in his presence. His voice could stop a room, but it was his quick reflexes that ended up saving someone's life. One day, during filming, the cast was riding in a real Huey helicopter. Nothing about this production felt staged, everything was meant to feel as close to war as possible. In the middle of the flight, the helicopter tilted suddenly. Charlie Sheen, young and reckless at the time, lost his balance and started sliding toward the open side door. There was no safety net. If he fell, the jungle waiting below was real, and so was the danger. Keith didn't hesitate. He reached out, grabbed the back of Charlie's jacket, and pulled him back inside with one hard yank. No script, no rehearsed hero moment, just instinct. If Keith had been even 1 second slower, the story of the film would have taken a tragic turn. The cast and crew never forgot that day. Charlie Sheen never forgot it either. Keith simply kept going, never making a big deal out of it, never looking for praise. As the years passed, Keith built a career that didn't depend on being on screen all the time. His voice became legendary. He carried whole worlds with it, animated shows, video games, documentaries, and characters that needed weight and soul. He became the voice behind iconic roles in shows like Gargoyles, dark heroes like Spawn, and entire universes in games like Mass Effect, Halo, and Call of Duty. He even became the steady voice of history itself in Ken Burns' documentaries. Any project that needed authority or heart seemed to find its way to him. By 2025, he is 69. Some of his features have softened, but something else has grown stronger: presence. He still moves like someone shaped by discipline, still speaks like someone who understands power, still carries himself with dignity. In 2026, he is finally receiving a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. He calls it the cherry on top, but anyone who has followed his work knows it should have happened years earlier. This is not the story of a man fading quietly into voice roles. He still performs jazz. He still appears in films. He still shows up with the same energy he had decades ago. And through it all, he carries the memory of that helicopter moment, the sweat, the fear, the raw instinct, along with every role that demanded strength, every line spoken in silence, every moment that proved who he was long after cameras stopped rolling. Kevin Dillon was only 21 when he stepped into the humid chaos of Vietnam, or at least Oliver Stone's version of it. He wasn't the star, but he didn't need to be. In Platoon, he played Bunny, a wired, unstable soldier with an eerie laugh and a haunted stare. He didn't talk much, but when he did, you remembered it. One line stuck in everyone's head like shrapnel. After brutally beating a villager with a rifle, he screamed, "Holy, __, you see. That, __, head come apart, man. That wasn't acting that made you admire the character. It was acting that made your skin crawl. And it put Kevin Dillon on Hollywood's map instantly. But fame doesn't always bring freedom. Dillon found himself boxed into that same character. Violent, twitchy, wildeed. It took years to carve a new identity. And it wasn't until 2004 that he truly flipped the script. HBO's Entourage gave him a second life. As Johnny Drama Chase, he was older, desperate, insecure, and always reaching for fame. Just out of reach. It was funny and tragic at the same time, and Dillon played it perfectly. The show ran for 8 seasons, pulling him out of the shadow of Platoon and into the glow of household recognition. He earned 3 Emmy nominations and a Golden Globe nod. But more than that, it gave him something rare. Big money. $11 million. Over the series run, peaking at $150,000 per episode, and another $2 million for the 2015 movie. Just from Entourage, he cleared $13 million. Still, success wasn't a straight line. Born in 1965 in Montmoran, New York, Kevin was part of a big family, one of 6 kids. His brother, Matt Dillon, became a teen idol. But Kevin followed a darker path on screen. Off-screen, things were unstable. 2. He married Jane Stewart in 2006 and had a daughter, Ava. He already had another daughter, Amy, from a previous relationship. But by 2019, the marriage collapsed in courtrooms and headlines. His ex-wife revealed the brutal truth in documents. Kevin had once earned millions, but was now surviving on $4,000 a month, scraping to meet child support and bills after the Entourage wave crash. He didn't quit, though. He couldn't. He pivoted to action movies and thrillers, staying busy, and eventually joined the podcast world with Victory, the podcast alongside his old Entourage co-stars. At 59, his face no longer holds the same sharp youth it did back in the jungle scenes of Platoon. But the humor is still there. John C. McGinley. John C. McGinley's journey into Platoon was practically an accident. In 1984, he wasn't famous. He was just filling in as an understudy for John Turturro off-Broadway when a casting agent spotted him. Weeks later, he was thrown into the Philippine jungle, standing in the middle of one of the rawest war movies ever made. At just 27, he played Sergeant O'Neill, a tricky, nervous survivor who makes it to the end by hiding under dead bodies during the bloody final battle. It wasn't a heroic part. It was something more uncomfortable, cowardice pretending to be cleverness, survival at any price. What people didn't see was what happened when the cameras stopped. McGinley and the rest of the cast were pushed through a brutal boot camp created by Vietnam veteran Dale Dye. There were no trailers, no soft treatment, no Hollywood comforts, just mud, heat, sweat, live fire drills, and almost no sleep. McGinley later said he could feel the blanks from the guns flying past his ears. By the time they started filming, the fear on his face wasn't acting. It was real. The movie hit audiences like a shockwave, and McGinley's performance stood out not because it was loud, but because it felt painfully real. After Platoon, he didn't slow down. His career exploded in unexpected directions, comedies, dramas, unforgettable side characters. Many people know him best as Dr. Cox in Scrubs, throwing insults like a machine gun but still managing to make people care about him. But something more important happened off-screen. In 2001, everything changed. His son Max was born with Down syndrome. Suddenly, Hollywood didn't matter as much. McGinley called the moment a cosmic hammer. His priorities flipped instantly. He backed away from work, canceled projects, and focused entirely on Max, who also had heart problems and severe sleep apnea. For a while, the career paused. The father became the center. But then something powerful happened. He didn't disappear, he evolved. He became a strong, outspoken advocate for the Down syndrome community. He helped push for laws, raised awareness, and used every part of his Hollywood platform to fight for kids like Max. And slowly, he found his way back to acting. Hallmark movies, guest appearances, comedies. The 2025 Scrubs revival pulled him back into the spotlight at age 66, still sharp, still fierce. Johnny Depp had a very different experience. When he stepped into the same Philippine jungle at 22, he had never even left the United States before. He wasn't a star. He wasn't even expected to stand out. But what he went through on the set of Platoon in 1985 didn't just push his body, it changed the direction of his life. His character, Private Gator Lerner, was a small part. A translator. A few scenes. But behind the scenes, things were different. Oliver Stone had originally written Depp a bigger role, something close to a real storyline. But once he realized the part would distract too much attention from Charlie Sheen's lead, Depp's scenes were quietly cut back. Depp didn't complain. He stayed quiet, stayed focused, and threw himself into the harshest movie boot camp Hollywood had ever tried. For 2 weeks, the cast lived like actual soldiers. No showers, no beds, no hotels. Just foxholes, bugs, hunger, heat, exhaustion, and constant drills. Dale Dye, a real Vietnam veteran, pushed them non-stop. They slept in the dirt, stayed in character all day and night, and barely ate. It wasn't acting anymore. It was surviving. Depp barely spoke in the movie, but when he did, it mattered. In the village scene where Sergeant Barnes shoots a woman, Depp's character must translate the screams. His voice shakes. The lines come out slowly. It feels helpless and real because the fear behind it wasn't fake. On his helmet, he had written the name Cherilyn, a small rebellion and a reminder of his girlfriend, Cherilyn Fenn, waiting back home. It was a tiny piece of his real life carried into a fictional war. Most viewers didn't even remember him when the movie released in 1986. But that didn't matter. Depp remembered it. That was the last time he would ever audition for a tiny part. By the time Platoon hit theaters, he had already been cast in 21 Jump Street. Soon he became a teen idol. But the jungle stayed with him. The mud, the sweat, the silence. It showed him he could disappear into any character, and that became the foundation of his entire career. Then there was Francesco Quinn, born on March 22, 1963, in Rome. He carried a last name that weighed more than most careers. His father was Anthony Quinn, a celebrated Oscar-winning actor. Francesco was the first son of Anthony's second wife, and from the moment he walked into Hollywood, everyone expected him to rise to that same legendary level. At 23, he landed the role of Ra in Platoon, a dark, intense soldier who dealt drugs, kept secrets, and watched everyone with a survivor's stare. Ra wasn't a background character, he was the tension that held the story together. Francesco didn't need to pretend to be troubled. He was already living in the shadow of a giant. His father's fame opened doors, but it also meant every role came with comparisons. Platoon was his breakthrough. When the movie won Best Picture at the 1987 Oscars, directors noticed him. He began getting offers. For a while, it looked like he might escape the long shadow of his father. He worked steadily, not as a superstar but as a reliable actor. He appeared in Jag, 24, The Shield, and The Young and the Restless. He played warriors, detectives, loners, addicts, roles that demanded depth and pain. In 2008, he earned critical praise for The Tonto Woman, a short western based on an Elmore Leonard story that received an Oscar nomination. People started noticing him again. Then came Transformers, Dark of the Moon in 2011. He voiced the Autobot Dino. He was 48. No one knew it would be his last film. On August 5, 2011, he went jogging in Malibu with his young son Max. It was supposed to be a normal day. Then he collapsed. A neighbor saw him fall and ran to help. His wife arrived as they tried to save him. But it was too late. He died on the street next to his child. A sudden heart attack. No long illness, no warning, no Hollywood scandal. Just a quiet, tragic end. He didn't get a dramatic Hollywood farewell, but people still remember the haunted look he carried in Platoon. That restless energy, that depth that couldn't be faked. He carried something heavy inside him, and when he died, Hollywood lost a rare kind of truth. And then there was Tony Todd. He was 31 when he was dropped into the steamy jungles of the Philippines and told to act like he had lived through Vietnam. But Tony Todd didn't need to pretend. He carried a kind of battle inside him, not a military one, but the struggle of being a black actor in Hollywood, constantly overlooked, constantly fighting to be seen. In February 1986, Platoon began its intense 54-day shoot. The actors didn't just play soldiers. They became them. They dug real trenches, slept in the open, trained under Dale Dye until their bodies gave out, and endured explosions that felt dangerously real. Todd stood quietly in the middle of it all, playing Sergeant Warren with a calm, solid presence. Oliver Stone didn't cast him from a fancy audition room. He cast him after seeing Todd perform a one-man show in a tiny theater in Hell's Kitchen, Johnny Got His Gun. Todd performed alone on stage, playing a soldier who had lost everything except his thoughts. It wasn't just acting. It was lived pain, shaped into storytelling. Stone didn't want polished Hollywood faces. He wanted real ones. Todd's face carried history, poverty, rejection, theater grit, and years of being ignored. His deep, unforgettable voice should have made him a leading man. But Hollywood didn't see him that way. They saw the voice and gave him monsters. Ghosts. Shadows. When he became famous as Candyman in 1992, he became iconic, but trapped. Audiences loved him, but studios didn't give him leading roles. He had the presence of a hero, the training of a classical actor, and a soul tempered by struggle, but he was repeatedly boxed into horror roles. He married Fatima Cortez as his career rose, but fame brings pressure, not peace. The long filming schedules, conventions, and fans who wanted the horror icon instead of the real man slowly pushed strain into their marriage. Still, Todd never stopped working. Final Destination brought him another wave of fame as a mysterious mortician who treated death not as something scary, but inevitable. Every role he played came with that same quiet power, calm on the outside, fire underneath. By 65, he still hadn't been given the roles he truly deserved, but he kept going. Through pain. Through sickness. Then came the diagnosis, stomach cancer. He told almost no one. On set, he smiled, joked, worked hard. In private, he battled his body alone. His final film, Final Destination, Bloodlines, finished shooting just months before he died. In one scene, he improvised a line, looking directly into the camera and saying, "Don't waste your breath hating life. That breath is all you have." No one dared cut it. He passed away on November 6, 2024, at age 69. When fans heard the news, they didn't just post Candyman quotes. They shared the forgotten moments, the Platoon scenes, the theater performances, the wisdom he carried through horror. His presence stayed with people long after the roles faded.